before. Well, Ilya's talk reminded me something that someone once told me. There are two types of developers. Those that think that CSS is really complicated, and those that know that CSS is really complicated. So I think he knows. I only think so. All right, so before I start, a very important question. Who here is using React or used React? Whoa, OK. Who's using Angular 2 or 4 or 5? Cool. And who is using Redux? Ah, perfect. Because the talk today is going to be my first talk in a long time, being an advanced one. So I'm assuming you all know React and all know Redux, as we're going to be diving a bit deeper inside. If you have any questions, you can just stop me. And, well, raise your hand, and I might stop myself. Let me check this clicker. Well, the laser is working, which is nice. Amazing UX. How do I switch? The big button. How do I go back? OK, makes sense. All right. So what we're going to learn today is we're going to learn a lot of nice and interesting things about Redux. What we're not going to learn about is any new additional libraries. So the only thing we're going to be speaking about is pure old Redux. And it sounds kind of weird to most people, because Redux and its base is only 4 APIs. Like real basic Redux is create store, right? And then you get the store object. And then you have No. That's the no. So on the store, you have three things. So once you created the store, you have three functions on the store. One of them is get state. One of them is no, you don't have set state. One of them is dispatch. And the last one, no one remembers it, subscribe. I wish I had some things to throw, like in a good way, not in a bad way. So the Redux in its base is 4 functions. I have a gist somewhere here showing how we can write Redux from scratch in about 5 minutes. But since the talk is only 25 minutes, we won't do it. But I put it in the comments for the post. If you just want to see how Redux can be written in this amount of code, check it out. The other things people mentioned here, like connect, that's not really Redux, that's React Redux, the connector, which surprisingly is also really simple. So writing the connect function is also about half a page of code. In the real implementation, it's a lot more because they optimized like crazy, made it really performant. But the base of connect, super simple. And I've also put that in the comments if you want to read it later. OK, a few words about myself. So I've been developing since I was this high and this low, hair-wise. I started as an architect, DevOps, whatever it's called, in the Microsoft world. Spent 4 years doing embedded development, Linux kernel development. I spent 4 years doing Ruby on Rails, which was, I think, the most fun I ever had. And then I spent 4 years doing Angular and React, which is, well, it's not the least fun because doing DevOps is horrible, but somewhere down there. I'm at the end of my 4-year lease, or whatever, cycle, I don't know how to call it. So if anyone has any ideas, I asked it in previous meetups, no one came up. Node, 4 years of Node? No. Too much. More exciting, less JavaScript. Something new. Assembly? No, I've done that. Embedded, we've been there. Maybe virtual reality, I don't know, the future, something. Self-driving drones in Slack. I don't know. That's all the buzzwords I know now. AI. So I work at a company. Our name is 500 Tech. Someone asked me why, and now I have a new explanation why. Because we're way better than 300, but we're more affordable than 700. So we're like in the perfect position if you needed a consulting or training. We're originally based in Israel. We do Angular 1, Angular 2.4.5, etc. We do React, a lot of React Native now, which is really blowing up in 2017. And slowly starting up an office here, which Ilya is leading. I just came for a visit and to meet the people, to see what's going on here, and to be very excited that so many people are doing React, which is and dreams. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to jump in immediately to a thing that I think is the most important in all of Redux, and that most people never use, which is, for me, sounds crazy. Like, I've seen really big projects written in React and Redux, and they didn't even have a directory with middlewares inside of it, like nothing. And I would ask him, do you know what middlewares are? I say, yeah, we read about them in some book. It sounded nice, but we never use them. But they do use one middleware. Who knows the name of a middleware that everyone is using?
Express.
Which one?
Express.
No, a middleware for Redux. I heard the word there. Funk, Redux Funk. So everyone is using Redux Funk. And because it's a middleware, they think they're using middlewares, but they're actually cheating. And we're going to cure it today. Today is going to be a cure. This is an unneeded slide because it doesn't add anything. So this is how a middleware looks, right? Let me see if I can get my pointer. Yes, perfect. We're showing it on both sides. So a middleware base looks really complicated, right? It's a function that returns a function that returns a function that runs a function. And this is, I think, why lots of people are not using middlewares, because after, I think, the third one, they say, all right, it's probably a mistake. Let's move forward. So it's not really a mistake. If you move this to ES6 or ES 2015, it looks a little bit better. It looks something like this. And then it's kind of readable, and it's fine. But you don't even need to remember that, because once you know how to write or just copy-paste the line on top, you're good. So what's the idea of middlewares? They're very similar to what we have in Node. The middlewares in Node, right, like Express and others. Basically, every action you send to the store via store dispatch gets routed through all the middlewares you have registered, one after the other. Right? So if I have 50 middlewares, every action will go through all of them. The nice thing about middlewares, they have an amazing control about what's happening in our Redux application. So as you can see in the parameters on here and here, so we have, first of all, we have access to dispatch. So we can dispatch other actions. I didn't write it here, but it was on the previous slide. Get state, and the reason is because it just didn't fit in one line, so it didn't look so good. But you also have get state, so you can know the state of your application. You have access to action, so you can see exactly what the action being passed. You can modify it. It's not a good idea, but you can. And the most important bit is the next function. So you can decide when to pass this action onwards to the next middleware in line. And which means you can delay it, you can change it, or you can even go crazy and pass it 2 times. Again, not a good idea. So a very simple example of a middleware, it's a benchmarking middleware. Let's say we see that something is slow in our application. And instead of trying to put lots of timers everywhere, I can just add a simple middleware and run the timing just before I pass it onwards. This way I can see if some action, I don't know, add to do suddenly is running for 50 seconds because someone tried to do a loop inside the loop, or worse even, do a full copy of a state. So that's the whole idea of middlewares that don't really look that scary once you look at them. But they don't look so productive yet. So I want to give you another example. And before I show you an example, I'll ask you a question. Let's say you have a product that's already working. And your product manager comes to you and says, I want to add analytics to the product. So every time someone adds an item to the cart, every time someone wants to check out or do any meaningful activity, I want to get notified. So since we're working in a single-page application, it's not just adding Google Analytics tag and watching for page refresh, right? We have to respond to actions. So in the old world, I would go to any place that makes sense and put a call to GA, right? And if tomorrow someone would come to me and say, you know what, instead of Google Analytics, we found this cool tool called, I don't know, ClickTail or whatever, you have to go to all the places and change it everywhere again. With Redux, we can do something more exciting. I can create a middleware that's responsible for analytics. So the way it's going to work, I'm going to look inside my action for a new key called meta. I don't know if you guys heard about FSA, which is Flag Standard Actions. It's not a library. I said I'm not going to be talking about library. It's an idea for a standard, for a way for us to write our actions so they'll be compatible between different libraries. All FSA says is that we're going to put inside the action a type, like we always do, a payload where all the data sits, and meta where we can throw additional information. For example, analytics. So if I create, my middle is going to be like this. I'm going to be looking at the action meta and checking if there is an analytics key inside, letting the action through. And then if the analytics is inside, I'm going to be calling Google Analytics ClickTable. It's ClickTail, it's not ClickTable. That makes no sense. Or anything else. So how do I use this thing? Well, if I have somewhere an action creator that looks like this, add to do, all I have to do is go at the bottom of it, just add a meta tag, and say what kind of event the analytics should send out. This way, I can just go over all my action creators, one by one, look at them and say, you know what, this I want to measure, this one I don't care about, and add it in one place. And now it doesn't matter where on my application the user is clicking the buttons, we're always getting notified by Google Analytics. And everything is going through one middleware. So if tomorrow you want to change Google Analytics to, I don't know, I have no other ideas. Probably you guys know better, because I've usually... Analytics 4. Perfect. I can change it only in one place. OK, so that was easy. Let's try another example that, surprisingly, middlewares help us. Autocomplete. So I'm going to create an autocomplete. It's going to be autocompleting all the names in, let's say, this meetup. Let's go in the meetup group. So I might have something like this, right? I'm going to be dispatching action creator for autocomplete and passing it B. So just as I'm typing, I'm calling autocomplete, right? So that thing, since the meetup is pretty big, it's going to take about 100 milliseconds to give us all the names that have B inside of them. But I'm still typing, right? So I'm not looking for B. I know I'm looking for myself. So me as a user, BO, right? I added another letter. It's just so I dispatch autocomplete for BO. And that's only 70 people, so it's going to be much faster. And the last one, this is where I'm going to stop. BOR, perfect. There's only 2 people. I don't know why I have 2 people like here. It's supposed to be only me. It's only 2 people, so it's going to take 3 milliseconds. Now, what happens in the UI? After 3 milliseconds, I get Boris and Boris 2. Huh?
Miles Boris is here, that's why.
Yeah? You're here?
Yeah, the first speaker.
Ah, perfect. So us, we're going to show up. After another 67 milliseconds, suddenly all the BR are showing, right? BO showing. And then after a while, everyone is showing. How do we combat that? Well, we have this whole idea about debouncing, right? Don't run autocomplete before, let's say, 500 milliseconds have passed. But to do that, we have to now use, I don't know, maybe use something from inside of Nodejs, maybe write some custom code on our own. And we have to use that code in any place we want to have debouncing working. How about instead, we create a middleware that automatically looks at the meta tag at the bottom. And if it sees that there is a debounce key, it will not let the autocomplete action pass downwards. It will stop it, wait for 500 milliseconds, and only then call next on this action. And if someone calls for another autocomplete during those 500 milliseconds, it will forget the first one, just throw it out, keep the second one for 500 milliseconds, and then let it through. So on the side of a middleware, it's not that simple. It actually becomes quite complicated to handle it all with timeouts and cleaning. It's about, let's say, 30 lines of code. And there is a library doing that. But now on any action that for some reason you don't want to spam the server or somehow ruin the UI, instead of copy-pasting a lot of debounce code, you just add a meta tag. Debounce, and that's it. Magically, your action is debounced. Again, middlewares. And the big one. This is like what I've been waiting for. So Redux Func. The main reason people are using Redux Func is for server communication. Because no matter what you try, that's going to be asynchronous, right? There's no way to do it synchronous, at least not on the client side. And let's say I have an action creator for fetching users. If I'm using Redux Func, instead of returning, this is horrible, Ilya, I'm sorry. Instead of returning an object, I'll be returning a function, right? This is Redux Func, which gets dispatch and gets state. And then inside of it, I can do whatever I want. So the way I would probably call it, it's do something like this. I'll use the fetch API, go to some user's URL, wait for the data to be returned, and then dispatch set users once I get the data. I'll have some very primitive error handling here. And this thing works. Like, it works really nice with Redux func. The only problem is, what if we need authentication? So if I need authentication, it adds some code here to fetch the access token from the user. Maybe I also want to check my error codes a little bit better than console log. Like, some error codes, I want to show the message. If it's unauthorized, I might want to log out the user. So the logic here becomes really complicated with time. But then after a while, I want to add another action creator, fetching comments for a user. And what happens here? Pretty much the same code. And once you look at your action creators directory, all the files start to look pretty long and complicated because all of them has asynchronous data in them, right? They're all asynchronous, really hard to test, lots of options for bugs. And I've seen some of them that's used to call asynchronous actions that themselves call asynchronous actions, and they call asynchronous actions. And the weird thing, if you look at the log of actions on the Redux side, you don't see anything in the log because all of these things are running with Redux func. So it's all fetches and intervals and whatnot, and only after a long time, you might see an error or an actual action coming out of all this mess. But if you look at these two, you might notice that the only thing that differentiates them is this, right? The only difference between the two fetch operations is the URL we want to hit and the action we want to send once it's done. So how about we try something different? Instead of writing it as code, we can try doing something more declarative. Dramatically. So what I want to try to do is guess the button again, this one. And instead of returning with Redux func, an action, an object, a function, I'll return an object that just describes what I want to do. So in this case, I want to run an action of type API. I want it to hit the user's URL. And when it's successful, I want it to call set users, right? Exactly the same information as we had for here, right? All right. So how would my middleware look? We talked about the general declaration, right? That's easy. First of all, we're going to check if the action type is the type we're expecting. So this thing is kind of surprising to a lot of people coming to middlewares. Not all actions are intended for reducers. In the classical Redux way, if I write an action, I have to run and find the reducer and put it in that big switch statement. Sometimes I can write actions that are intended only for the middleware. Theoretically, if the type is API, I might not even pass it to my reducers because they don't really care, right? So now I know that it's an action of type API. I'm going to run my nice fetch code. And now it's going to be dynamic. I'm going to get the URL from inside the payload. And once I'm successful, I'm going to dispatch the action that I got inside the payload. So this thing is turning to be a very generic API model, right? Every time I want to make a server call, I pass it a simple JavaScript object that describes the action I want to do. Right? There's no special weird code, no handling of synchronous data. On my side of action creators, it becomes really simple. I can, of course, add error handling, a more robust one. And all my action creators now are just plain functions returning JavaScript functions. Super easy to test, super easy to read. And another nice bonus, if you look at the log of your Redux actions, you actually see an action of type API coming in to the middleware, and then suddenly success, error, or even a crash coming out. So it's much easier to debug, like especially if you had it in production and you got your log now in Jira. Someone sent in a weird API request where they used, I don't know, instead of comments, they used com nets or something like that. So you know it's broken somewhere in your code before sending the action. This thing works very well not only for GET APIs, right? We can also do updates. Again, obviously, we have to improve our middleware. If I specify an update method, I can also build the URL dynamically. So now if I want to update my user and I get, let's say, the data I want to update with and the ID of the user, I dynamically build the URL to go to inside the action creator and pass the data to my API middleware. And it will do a post to the server or update to the server. Same thing, if I want to delete a comment, again, completely declarative. I get the comment ID, method delete, what URL to go, and not even ignoring the success, because in my case, I don't care. If it was successful, I'm assuming it worked. We can go and take this thing even further. So my middleware now is pretty simple, right? It's only handling GET requests. Let's say I wanted to handle authentication, authorization. Well, authentication only. All I have to do now is use get state instead of a middleware, since I have access to state. And if there's an authentication token present, I will just set the headers. So now any action I send through my application API middleware, automatically authenticated with server. And this is only the beginning. So with time, we can try and expand the API middleware to support more and more declarative syntax. For example, I might want to add something like pre-processing, right? I know that the data coming from an API endpoint for users, instead of being a list of users, is some kind of weird structure that the server developers created for I don't know why. So I wanted to pass through my own filter before I feed it back to Redux. So I can provide a custom processor. I might want to use a custom spinner, right? Let's say I have 4 different panels. Each one is loading. I want to have an independent spinners for each one. So this thing can allow me to have an API middleware, send a special special action like transfer started for spinner or transfer added for spinner, and have my state show me how many transfers are currently running for the user type or the comments type. Another thing you can do, custom error handling. That's kind of obvious. And in nicer things, let's say when I'm fetching users, I know that specific API can be really slow. So I want the timeout there to be a bit longer. Disable authentication, 1,000 other things. The reason I really like this approach is because all the complicated logic for handling timeouts, error handling, custom spinners, whatever, it's hidden in one place, in my API middleware. I wrote it once, I tested it once, that's it. I can reuse it forever. And in my code, like in my real code, all you'll see is just this nice declarative syntax. Easy to read, easy to understand, easy to share between teams. Right? So if you have a very big project, one team might create all these API middlewares, debounce middlewares, I don't know, 1,000 other middlewares, and go to all the application teams and tell them, if you guys want to debounce something, just add debounce. If you want to add a timeout on an API, just add a timeout. The API is really simple. Just a few words about middleware compared to Redux, Func. In the middleware, you have access to almost everything. You can get the state, dispatch delay actions, mutate actions, cancel actions, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe I'm not authorized to do the action. You can do all that with Func. So Func is pretty limited. Behind the scenes, I was planning to add the code for Func, but I forgot. Func is super easy. If you think about it, Func is a middleware that looks at the action, and if type of action is function, it just calls the action because it's a function. It's literally 3 lines, surprisingly. So it is a middleware, but we're not even using it as a middleware, right? We're using it as a fake way to move dispatch to action creators. So first of all, once you start switching to middlewares massively, you'll discover that all your logic is suddenly sitting in one place. Action creators become super simple. They're pretty much empty. They're just function returning objects. There's even nothing to test for because it's just, the test is going to be, is this function returning the object really returning the object? Well, it is. So not much work there. Like most of the project, if you open up our projects, you'll see a lot of logic in middlewares, some logic in special libraries for converting data and whatnot. Reducers, super simple. Action creators, simple. And the Redux part and the React part, just UI. So it's much easier to compartmentalize. That's a complicated word. Yeah, I have to record it and just play it. All right. How much time do we have? Do we have time? Perfect. All right. So there's one problem with middlewares, like one thing that's really missing. And let's say we want to create a middleware, not middleware. Let's say I want to create a system where I can sync the whole state of application to the local storage. So now, as you know, middleware sounds kind of simple, right? I just create a local storage middleware. And every time there's an action of type, I don't know, save, I'm going to serialize the store and save it to local storage, right? Something like this thing. So if the action type is set local storage, just stringify the get state and save it. Super simple. The question is, how can I deserialize it now? How can I get it out of local storage and apply it to the current state? Any ideas? How would I write this thing now to handle get local storage or load local storage? But let's say it's something, I'm using this for undo in redo, right? So every time I make a major change, I also set local storage, and then I want to have a button like, OK, undo. Sorry, maybe it's a kind of big form that I'm feeding. I want to just cancel and go back. And I don't want to create the whole store. So I got get state here, right? Do I have set state? No. What's the only way to update the store in Redux, the official way? Dispatch an action. But who is responsible for updating the store? I heard like very quiet reducer people. So yeah, reducers. Yeah, reducers are the only ones allowed to touch the store. But we don't have any access to reducers here. Like the only thing that's happening here is that we have an action. It's passing through all these middlewares and back to the store, and then the store someday will call a reducer. OK, so we have to somehow move this code to the reducer area. And this might be the code which you see inside your reducer. Right? Very standard root reducer, just using combined reducers and putting all our reducer inside of it. But how can I push something here? So I want to add stuff inside here to load custom data without going inside of each of the reducers. So there's another feature. It's not even a feature. It's, let's say, architectural model inside of Redux called decoration. I can basically decorate any reducer with additional functionality. And here I'm going to lie a little bit, because I told you I'm not going to be talking about any external libraries, but I'm going to talk about one or two. For example, Redux undo. So Redux undo is a library that gives us reducer decorators. And it gives us a very weird syntax. So instead of putting my comments like users, it's a user reducer, recipes, a recipes reducer, I can wrap a reducer in a function, this way returning a decorated reducer. Now, inside the decorated reducer, basically, I can do anything I want, right? I got the action. I can decide to stop for a second, load something from local storage, and return that instead of whatever reducer was planning to reduce. I can change the action before I give it to that specific reducer. And that's exactly what undoable does. So undoable looks at all the actions coming through to the comments reducer, examines them, and then might decide, you know what, instead of passing it to the original comments reducer, I'm just going to load it from local storage and get back. And I can use it. And then like the Redux undo also gives me the action creators to do automatic undo. We have a number of other cool things inside of it. Things like ignore actions. For example, I might be sending an action. Every time I scroll the page, I want to send an action because, I don't know, I'm counting something, or I want to wait until something becomes visible. But that action might happen hundreds of times. It's going to be spanning my reducers. And one of the reducers might be a bit complicated and slower. And I don't want it to be hit every time scroll page is said. So there's another library, Redux ignore. Again, it's a very simple decorator that wraps my recipes reducer and tells it, you know what, every time the scroll page action is sent, don't even call my recipes reducer. Just skip it. So this is like more of an advanced speed optimization. I've seen it used only once when it was really needed. But this whole idea of reducer decoration allows me to change reducers from the outside and use generic tools to improve my reducers. There are a lot of cool stuff inside of Redux. Like this was just the edge of the iceberg. I think middlewares are the most important. The whole decorator thing goes a bit further. There are libraries that allow you to decorate action creators. There are libraries that allow you to decorate the store itself. Reducer decorations, I'm guessing it's the most common ones. There are even some crazy libraries that allow you to automatically create constants for your action type names. That was my comment when I've seen that one. They look nice, but they're kind of weird. I really suggest to anyone working on a big project to spend some time reading more of the advanced blogs, because many of the people I meet working on React and Redux, they read the basics. They've seen a few examples of how to do a to-do app application. They've seen Redux Funk, and it's working, so they just went along with that. But there's also very interesting material out there about people using more crazy concepts that save a lot of code and make everything more readable and easy to use. So like really take a weekend off, not off completely, but you have a few hours. Read, there's amazing stuff out there. And of course, a shameless plug, me and Ilya spent about a year writing a book about Redux. There's no relation to React or Angular, pure Redux. We tried to compile all the cool resources we found about Redux there, decoration of whatever you want, even decoration of decoration. It used to be free up until a week ago, but if you want, we'll give you free coupons, of course, so you can download. We'd love to hear feedback. We had a 2-week free giveaway, so about 13 or 14,000 people downloaded it, and now we're starting to get some feedback and fix it. So if you have any ideas and you read it, we'd love to hear. That's it. That's me. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer now or after the meetup. And don't forget Ilya's coffee or whatever he wants. Any questions? Yeah.
The concept. Okay, I just got to remember what I was going to ask. Is that only what you showed for Redux, or could you use those concepts in another context?
It's a tough question. So decoration you can use everywhere in JavaScript. The middlewares are specific to Redux. No, that's specific to Redux because of the whole flow of actions. Okay. Probably there's a way to apply to our thing, but I don't know. Anything else?
I got a quick question. Do you use Thump now?
No. Like the first thing I do when I come to a new project to just check what's going on, we open package.json to see what's going on inside. And if I see jQuery or Redux Funk, like, all right, guys, we're gonna have a chat now, and hopefully I can convince you. Hopefully, at least jQuery has to go, but hopefully Redux Funk as well. Yeah.
Whoa.
Where are you going? So you're next.
Did you notice anyone? Any instances of abuse of the middleware?
That's a good question.
Using it for something that
actually it's a very good question of abusing middlewares. I've seen so many few people using middlewares, so I don't think I've yet seen them abuse it. It will probably happen. Like it's so easy to abuse. No, yes, I've seen it. Right. So I've seen one company, they were trying to synchronize between the navigation on top and data coming from the server. So depending on what came from the server, it will change the URL. And they try to synchronize the data, the URL, using the Redux router and middleware. And no, it wasn't good. Like I sat with the guy about 2 hours, and we'll be changing URLs and watching the actions, and things will be jumping, and we didn't know why. And it was exciting, but yeah, but no. But that was a special, like a very special, weird way and requirement. So it wasn't his fault. The requirement was insane. So no, like nothing. As long as you keep him a lot of middlewares and very small middlewares, it's really hard to go crazy. Unless, okay, another thing I've seen people do, they use a middleware to a sort of flow of data. So when you get, let's say, a login action, they have a middleware that once it catches a login action, dispatches the get notifications, get users, get comments action. And one of those might dispatch multiple other things, and then you might have weird conditions of one action is coming inside, but 50 actions are coming out, and then you might have flow problems. But again, that's like, you'll know you're abusing it probably if you're doing that. There's a question here, Kirill, can you?
I've got the mic.
Never mind.
It's a mic, I forgot.
You mentioned that you recommend reading some advanced blog posts to get better at Redux, and I see you have your blog up on the screen here. Do you have any other recommended sources?
So the book is the best source, of course. I don't think, so there are a few GitHub repositories where people collect Redux resources. I forgot the name. There's one guy, he has like a really big repo of lots of documentation about advanced stuff and simple stuff, everything about Redux. I'll try to find it and put it on the comments. Because I found a lot of interesting stuff there, just like hundreds of articles about Redux and advanced libraries and cool things. Right?
Let's give it up for Boris.
Yep. Thank you very much, guys.